I just pray that God grants you the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of Him as we dive into the book of Daniel, the seer, from the Passion Translation. Daniel and his friends in the court of the king. It was the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched on Jerusalem and besieged the city. My Lord gave Nebuchadnezzar victory over King Jehoiakim and permitted the Babylonian ruler to remove some of the sacred vessels belonging to the temple of the true God. Nebuchadnezzar carried them away to the land of Babylon and placed the sacred vessels into the temple treasury of his own gods. Later, the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief officer, to select a certain number of youths from the royal or noble families of the Israelites who would be suitable for service in the king's palace. They were to be handsome young men without defect, well versed in every branch of wisdom. They were to be intelligent, discerning, and qualified for royal service. Ashpenaz was instructed to teach them the culture, the literature, and the language of the Babylonians. The king provided them a daily allowance of the best food and wine from the king's table. For 3 years, they were to receive a thorough education, after which they would enter the king's service. Among these men of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But the chief official of the palace gave them Babylonian names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. However, Daniel determined in his heart not to contaminate himself with the food and wine from the royal table, so he begged the chief official to exempt him from the royal diet. Then God moved on the heart of the chief official to show Daniel favor and compassion. But he warned Daniel, "My lord the king has ordered your meat and drink, and I fear that he will notice if your face starts looking worse than the other men your age. You could put my life in jeopardy with the king." Daniel then appealed to the overseer, whom the chief officer put in charge over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel said to him, "Test us, your servants, for 10 days. Give us only seeds to eat and water to drink. Then afterward compare our appearance with those of the young men who eat the king's food. Then you can decide what to do with us." So the overseer agreed to do what they requested and tested them for 10 days. And when the 10 days were completed, they looked healthier and had even gained weight. The 4 Hebrew young men were in better physical condition compared to any of the others who had eaten their food from the royal table. So the guard replaced their diet of royal food and wine with vegetables and water. 4 exceptional young men. God imparted insight and skill in every aspect of literature and science to the 4 Hebrew men. Daniel also had the unique gift of interpreting every kind of supernatural vision and dream. At the end of the period that the king had assigned for their training, the chief of the palace servants brought them to Nebuchadnezzar's court. The king interviewed them all, and among all the young men, he found none to equal Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So the king chose them to serve as his advisors, and when the king questioned them on any point of wisdom or understanding, he found them 10 times superior to all the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. And Daniel continued there in Babylon as a royal advisor until the time Cyrus became king. Chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar's troublesome dream. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had an ominous dream. It left him so disturbed that he could not sleep. So the king called for his magicians, enchanters, wizards, and wise men to tell him what he had dreamed. And they all came and stood before the unsettled king. He told them, "I've had a dream, and my heart is troubled. I want to know what my dream means." The wise men answered him in Aramaic, "May you live forever, O king. Tell your servants the dream you had, and we will gladly reveal its meaning for you." "My decision is final," the king answered. "If you cannot tell me what I dreamed and what it means, I will have you torn limb from limb and turn your homes into garbage dumps. But if you can tell me what I dreamed and its interpretation, I will reward you with wonderful gifts and high honor in my kingdom. So now, tell me my dream and what it means." They again replied, "Let the king tell his dream to his servants, and we will gladly reveal its meaning." But the king retorted, "I know what you're doing. You're just stalling for time. My decision is firm. If you do not interpret my dream for me, you will all receive the same punishment. You have conspired to continue deceiving me with your lies, hoping something will change. So tell me now what I dreamed, so that I can be assured that you are able to interpret it for me." The wise men answered the king, "There is no one on earth who could do that, what your majesty commands. Furthermore, no king, great or small, has ever requested such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. Your majesty, what you ask is difficult, and it's impossible for anyone to reveal it except the gods, and they do not live with mortals." At this, the king flew into a violent rage and ordered all the wise men of Babylon to be executed. When the king's decree was issued to have all the wise men killed, a search was also made for Daniel and his companions to have them put to death. Daniel intervenes. As Arioch, captain of the royal bodyguard, set out to execute the wise men of Babylon, Daniel cautiously and tactfully approached this royal officer and asked him, "Why has the king issued such a harsh decree?" When Arioch explained all that had transpired, Daniel immediately went off to plead with the king for more time so that he could seek the interpretation of the king's dream. Daniel then went home and explained everything to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. He urged them to beg the God of heaven for mercy to help them unravel the mysterious secret of the king's dream so that Daniel and his friends would not be executed with the other Babylonian wise men. That night, God clearly revealed to Daniel in a night vision the mystery of the dream. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven, saying, "May the blessed name of God be praised forever and ever, for wisdom and might are His alone. He alone controls the changes of times and seasons. He enthrones and dethrones kings. He imparts wisdom to the wise, and He pours out revelation knowledge to those with understanding. He alone reveals the deep secrets and mysteries and knows what lies in darkness. And He radiates glory light all around Him. You are the God worshipped by all my ancestors. I give you thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power. You have revealed to us the king's dream and unraveled to me its meaning." Daniel interprets the king's dream. Then Daniel went back to see Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not kill the wise men. Take me into the king's presence, and I will reveal the dream's meaning to the king." Without wasting a moment, Arioch escorted Daniel to see the king. Arioch said to Nebuchadnezzar, "Your Majesty, I have found one of the Jewish exiles who can reveal the meaning of your troublesome dream." The king said to Daniel, whose Babylonian name was Belteshazzar, "Is it true? Can you tell me what I dreamed and what it means?" Daniel replied, "None of the wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers are able to unveil the mystery you have asked about. But there is an all-knowing God in heaven who reveals the deepest mysteries. Your Majesty, He is the one who has revealed to you what is to take place in the last days. Here is your dream, the vision that filled your mind as you lay on your bed. Your Majesty, as you were going to sleep, your thoughts turned to what would happen in the future. The revealer of mysteries has disclosed future events to you. This mystery has been revealed to me not because I am wiser than anyone else, but for one divine purpose, so that you, the king, should learn what it means and that you would understand your innermost thoughts. Your Majesty, you saw standing before you a huge statue of a man. It was both dazzling and terrifying to behold. The head of this statue was of purest gold. Its chest and arms were of gleaming silver, its belly and hips of polished bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly clay. While you were staring at this statue, a boulder broke off from a mountain, but not by the instrument of human hands. The boulder struck the statue at its base and shattered its feet of iron and clay into pieces. Then all at once, the entire statue collapsed into a heap of rubble. The iron and clay, bronze, silver, and gold were all pulverized as fine as chaff on the summer threshing floor. The wind blew the shattered pieces away, leaving not a trace behind. But the boulder that hit the statue grew into a massive mountain that covered the whole earth. This was your dream, and now we will explain to the king what it means. Your Majesty, you are the greatest of kings. The God of heaven has bestowed upon you royal authority, power, might, and honor. He has handed over to you people, beasts, and birds, wherever they live, making you king of them all. You, O king, are the golden head. And after you are gone, another kingdom will arise, a kingdom not as great as yours. Then a third kingdom will arise to rule the land, a kingdom of bronze. And there will be a fourth kingdom, strong and hard as iron. It will shatter all things in its way, like iron that breaks everything to pieces. It will crush and break all the other kingdoms. The feet and toes you saw, partly of iron and partly of clay, represent a divided kingdom that will retain some of the iron's strength, just as you saw the iron and the clay mixed together. That its feet and toes were partly iron and partly clay means that this kingdom will be both strong and fragile. And just as you saw the iron and the clay mingled together, so the people of this kingdom will seek to be united, but they will not bond any more than iron will permanently bond with clay. In the days of those kings of iron and clay, the God of heaven will set up an eternal kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor ruled by other people. It will shatter and bring all other kingdoms to an end. It will stand forever. This is the meaning of what you saw in your vision. A rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that shattered the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces is His eternal kingdom. The great God has revealed to you the king what will take place after this. The dream is true, and its interpretation trustworthy. The king honors Daniel. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar bowed low to the ground in awe of Daniel. Then he gave orders for incense to be burned and a sacrifice of grain to be offered in Daniel's honor. The king said to Daniel, "Your God is without question the God of all gods, the master of all kings, and the revealer of all mysteries, since he has given you the revelation of this mystery." Then the king promoted Daniel and made him great in the kingdom and gave him many wonderful gifts. He also made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and the chief of all the wise men of Babylon. At Daniel's request, the king delegated the affairs of the province of Babylon to his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel remained in the king's palace. Chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar's statue. King Nebuchadnezzar had a golden statue made that was 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. He erected the statue on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then ordered an assembly of his princes, magistrates, and governors, as well as the counselors, treasurers, judges, sheriffs, and all the other provincial authorities, that they should be present at the dedication of the statue he had erected. So all these officials gathered in front of the golden statue that the king had made. Then a herald made a loud proclamation, "Attention everyone! Listen to what the king commands of you, you of every nation and language. When you hear the ram's horn and the music of the flute, the lyre, the 10-stringed harp, the triangular harp, the drums, and all the other instruments, you will bow down to the ground and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has made. Whoever does not bow down to worship, it will immediately be thrown into a white, hot, fiery furnace." Therefore, at the set time, as soon as they had heard the musical instruments, those present from all the nations and languages bowed down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. The condemnation of the young Jewish men. At that point, certain Babylonian astrologers approached the king and maliciously denounced the Jews. They said to the king, "Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You issued a royal decree, O king, that when everyone hears the ram's horn and the music begins, they must bow down to the ground and worship the golden image. And whoever does not bow down and worship, it will be thrown inside a white, hot, fiery furnace. Yet, the prominent Jews whom you have appointed administrators of the province of Babylon have greatly disrespected you, your majesty. Their names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They do not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image you have set up." Upon hearing this, the king Nebuchadnezzar flew into a furious rage and ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be brought before him. When these men came before the king, he asked them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden statue that I erected? I now give you one more chance. When you hear the ram's horn and the music of the flute, the lyre, the 10-stringed harp, and the triangular harp, the drums, and the other instruments, you will bow down to the ground and worship the golden statue I have made. But if you refuse to worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a white, hot, fiery furnace. So now, who is the God that can save you from my power?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to offer you a defense in this matter. If the God we serve truly exists, then he will save us from death at your hand, O king. So, if you throw us into the fiery furnace, our God is able to save us. But even if he does not save us, you can be sure, O king, that we would not serve your gods or worship the golden statue you have erected. Daniel's 3 friends are sentenced to death. Upon hearing this, Nebuchadnezzar was filled with anger, and his face was distorted with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered his men to heat the fiery furnace 7 times hotter than it usually was. He also commanded some of his mighty men to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the white-hot furnace. Immediately, they tied up the 3 men while they still had on all their clothes, their trousers, shirts, and turbans, and then threw them into the white-hot furnace. But because the king's command was so urgent and the furnace so overheated, the raging flames burned up the men who carried Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire. And the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, tied and bound, fell inside the blazing white-hot furnace. Suddenly, King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and asked his officials, "Didn't we throw 3 men bound in fetters into the fire?" "That is correct, your majesty," they answered him. "But look," he shouted, "I see 4 men walking about freely in the fire. They're all unharmed, and the 4th man has the appearance of a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar cautiously approached the opening of the white-hot blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the great God, come out here now." So out of the midst of the fire walked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, completely unharmed. When all the king's officials had assembled along with the princes, magistrates, and governors, they discovered that the fire had not harmed these 3 men. Their hair was not singed, their clothes were not scorched, and they didn't even smell like smoke. King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, for he sent his divine messenger to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed my orders and laid their lives on the line than to serve or worship any god but their own. Now I hereby make this decree: any person from any nation or language who says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb, and his house will be destroyed, because there is no other God who is able to rescue so miraculously." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar praises God. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and language groups in the land, I wish you perfect peace and prosperity. It is my royal pleasure to inform you of the mighty signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs! How overwhelming are his wonders! His kingdom will last forever, and his dominion endures from one generation to the next. Nebuchadnezzar dreams about a great tree. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was content and at peace in my house, thoroughly enjoying a life of luxury in my palace. One night, I had a terrifying dream. While I was laying on my bed, frightening visions passed through my mind, and I was tormented by what I saw. So I issued a decree that all the sages of Babylon must come and explain to me what my dream meant. Magicians, enchanters, wizards, and wise men came, and I explained my dream to them, but they were unable to interpret it for me. Finally, Daniel came before me. I had renamed him Belteshazzar after my own God. The spirit of the holy gods resides in him. I then told Daniel my dream. Belteshazzar, chief of all my wise men, I know that the spirit of the holy gods resides in you, and that there is no mystery that you cannot solve. So listen to my dream and tell me what it means. While I slept, these visions passed through my mind. I saw a huge tree in the midst of the earth, and the tree grew taller and stronger until its top reached into the heavens. And it could be seen from the far reaches of the land, but its branches and foliage were beautiful, its fruit abundant, providing enough food for all. Animals rested under its shade, and birds found shelter in its sturdy branches. All living creatures were nourished from it. A watcher angel. While I was still asleep, I saw another vision. I saw a watcher, a holy one, come down from heaven. At the top of his voice, he announced, "Cut down the tree! Lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Drive away the animals from beneath its shelter and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump with its roots in the ground, encircle it with chains of iron and bronze, surrounded by the grass of the field, night after night. Let him be damp with heaven's dew. Let him live with the animals along the plants of the earth as his appointed lot. Let him eat the grass of the field for 7 years. Let his mind be altered into the mind of a beast." Such is the sentence decreed by the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, so that everyone living may learn that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men. He can give them to whomever he pleases, and raises up over them the lowliest of all people. Then King Nebuchadnezzar concluded, "That was my dream. Now it is for you, Belteshazzar, to interpret its meaning, since not one of the wise men in my kingdom has been able to interpret it for me. But I know that you can, since the spirit of the holy gods resides in you." Daniel interprets the king's dream. Upon hearing this, Daniel, known as Belteshazzar, was visibly shaken for a while and troubled in his thoughts. The king noticed this and said to him, "Belteshazzar, do not be alarmed by the dream and its meaning." Belteshazzar answered, "My lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you and its interpretation were for your enemies. The huge tree you saw, so large and tall that it reached into the heavens and could be seen from anywhere in the land. The tree with beautiful branches and foliage and abundant fruit, providing food for all the shade for the wild animals and birds with nests in its branches. That tree, your majesty, is you. You are now so great and strong that it reaches into the heaven, and your authority reaches over the entire land. Now you, O king, saw a watcher, a holy messenger, come down from heaven, saying, "Cut the tree down and destroy it. Leave the stump and roots in the ground. Encircle it with chains of iron and bronze in the midst of the grass of the field. Let him be damp with the dew every night. Let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth as his appointed lot until 7 years have passed by for him. So the meaning of what you saw, your majesty, and the decree of the Most High has decreed over you, my lord the king, is this. You will be driven far from human society and will make your home with the wild beasts for 7 years. Like cattle, you will eat grass, and you will be damp with the dew of heaven, until you have learned that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and can give them to whomever he pleases. And the Watcher's order, leave the stump with its roots in the ground, means this: God will restore your kingdom to you once you come to your senses and understand that heaven rules over all. Your Majesty, please be willing to do what I say and accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right. Turn from your wickedness by showing mercy to the poor and unfortunate, and perhaps your prosperity will continue. The dream comes true. All that was predicted happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. A year later, while strolling on the roof of his royal palace in Babylon, the king began to boast, "Look at you. This is not this Babylon the Great? By my brilliant wisdom, I built all this as my royal residence to display the glory of my majesty." The words were no sooner out of his mouth than a voice spoke from out of heaven. "Here is my verdict concerning you, Nebuchadnezzar. I have now taken your kingdom from you. You will be driven far from human society for 7 years. You will make your home with the wild beasts, and you will eat grass like cattle until you have learned that I, the Most High, am sovereign over the kingdoms of men and can give them to whomever I please." It was no sooner said than done. Nebuchadnezzar was forced to live like a wild animal and was driven far from human society and ate grass as cattle do. Night after night, he was damp with the dew of heaven. His hair grew remarkably long, like eagle's feathers, and his nails became like a bird's talons. Nebuchadnezzar praises the Most High. When the appointed time had come, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes to heaven, and my sanity returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, praising and glorifying him who lives forever. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from one generation to the next. All who dwell on earth are regarded as nothing compared to him. He does whatever he pleases, and with the armies of heaven and with those who dwell on earth. No one can restrain his mighty hand or dare ask him, "What are you doing?" At the moment I began to praise him, I was restored to my right mind. The Most High gave me back the majesty and splendor of my kingdom. My advisors and noblemen came looking for me. I was restored to my throne, and still more greatness was added to me. And now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, extol, and glorify God, the King of heaven. And his works are right and true, and all his ways are right. He knows how to humble those who strut around in pride. Chapter 5. Belteshazzar's Banquet. When Belteshazzar was king, he invited 1,000 of his nobles to a state banquet, where the wine flowed freely among all his guests. While Belteshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver vessels that his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple of Jerusalem. He was wanting to drink from them along with all his guests, his nobles, his wives, his concubines. So they brought in the sacred gold vessels that were seized from the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king, his nobles, his wives, and his concubines all drank from them. As they all drank their wine, they praised their man-made gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone. Then All at once, a human hand appeared out of thin air, and its finger began writing on the whitewashed wall of the palace, illuminated by the lampstand nearby. When the king witnessed this strange hand, as it was writing, terror gripped him. The color drained from his face, and his knees began to knock together, and he wet himself. The king shouted out, "Bring in the astrologers, wise men, and enchanters." And when they came before him, he said to all the wise ones of Babylon, "I will make rich and famous anyone who can read this handwriting on the wall and tell me its interpretation. He will wear the purple robes of royalty and wear a golden collar on his neck, and I will make him the third highest ruler in my kingdom." All the king's wise men came forward to examine the wall, but not one could read the writing or tell the king what it meant. King Belteshazzar grew more and more terrified. His face turned ashen, and all his nobles were dumbfounded. When the queen mother heard the uproar among the king and his nobles, she entered the banquet hall and said, "Long live the king! Do not be so alarmed. Why are you so pale? There is a mighty man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. During your predecessor's reign, he was found to have light, brilliant insight, and godlike wisdom. It was, in fact, your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, who made him chief of the wise men, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. This man Daniel, whom the fear and dread of him, he killed or spared whomever he pleased, and he exalted or humbled whomever he wished. But when his heart was inflated with pride, and his spirit hardened into stubbornness, God deposed him from his royal throne and stripped him of his glory. He was driven away like a civilization, from civilization, for his mind became like that of a beast. He lived with the wild donkeys and ate grass like an ox. His body was bathed with the dew of heaven until he finally acknowledged that the Most High God has dominion over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. Yet you, his successor, Belshazzar, you have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. Instead, you lifted yourself up above the sovereign Lord of the heavens, and you brought into your banquet hall the vessels of his temple, so that you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines might drink wine from them. You lifted praises to your gods of gold. Perez, God has divided up your kingdom and given it to the Medes and the Persians. Immediately, Belshazzar ordered Daniel to be clothed in a royal purple robe, to have a golden collar placed around his neck, and to be proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That very night, the Babylonian king Belshazzar was killed. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom when he was 62 years old. Chapter 6. The plot against Daniel. After he became king, Darius the Mede decided to subdivide his kingdom into 120 provinces and strategically appoint a governor for each province. He also appointed 3 chief officials to watch over the work of these governors so that the king's interests might not suffer. And Daniel was one of these 3. Now Daniel had an extraordinary spirit and possessed exceptional qualities. He so distinguished himself among all the chief officials and the governors that Darius intended to set him over his entire kingdom. For that reason, the chief officials and the governors were stirred to seek some pretext against Daniel regarding his governmental affairs. But because he was trustworthy, no one can find any error or fault in him, nor could they uncover any negligence or misconduct. Finally, his accusers said to themselves, "We will never find grounds for accusation against this Daniel unless it is related to his obedience to the law of his God." So these 122 powerful politicians consulted together as a group to entrap Daniel. And they went to speak to the king and said to him, "King Darius, live forever. All the officials of your kingdom, your high officials, administrators, advisors, and governors, we are all agreed that by royal decree the following prohibition should be enforced strictly for 30 days. No one is to pray to any god or man except to you, O king, otherwise he must be thrown into the lion's den. Now therefore, let the king issue this written irrevocable decree that cannot be altered according to the unchanging law of the Medes and the Persians." So King Darius signed the written decree. Daniel thrown into the lion's den. Even after Daniel learned that the king had officially signed his decree, he continued his regular custom of praying at 3 set times a day. He went to the upper chamber of his house and opened the windows facing toward Jerusalem. Then he got down on his knees to pray, and he offered his grateful praise to God as he always had done. Then all these who conspired against Daniel came and spied on him. They found him praying to God and asking him for help. So they approached the king and reminded him of his royal decree. "Your Majesty, did you not sign a decree forbidding anyone for 30 days to pray to any god or man except to you, O king, under the penalty of being thrown into the lion's den?" "Yes, I did, and my decree is final," the king answered. "It is irrevocable according to the law of the Medes and Persians." They then told the king, "We discovered that Daniel, one of the foreign Jewish exiles, pays no heed to you, O king, and ignores the decree you have signed. For he prays to his God 3 times a day." When King Darius heard this, he was deeply grieved and sought to find a way he could rescue Daniel from this fate. For most of that day until sundown, he wrestled within himself over how Daniel could be spared. But these powerful politicians went back to see the king and insisted, "Bear in mind, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, every edict or decree of the king is irrevocable." So the king gave orders to have Daniel brought in and cast into the lion's den. But before they threw him into the lion's den, the king said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you serve so faithfully, he will surely come to rescue you." A large stone was then brought and placed over the opening of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of each of his nobles, so that Daniel's fate might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace, where he spent the night fasting. He had no supper brought to him and could not sleep a wink. God protects Daniel. At the first sight of dawn, the king rose from his bed and hurried off to the lion's den. As he drew near the den of lions, he called out to Daniel with a trembling voice, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve so faithfully, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Then he heard a voice. It was Daniel. He was still alive. "O king, live forever," answered Daniel. "My God sent his angel who sealed the mouths of the lions. I am unharmed and without a scratch. For I have been found innocent before my God and before you too, O king. I have committed no wrong." The king was beside himself with joy. He gave orders to have Daniel taken up out of the lion's den. When the servants brought him up from the den, they could find no trace of injury on his body because he had trusted in his God. Then, at the king's command, those politicians who had maliciously plotted against Daniel, along with their wives and children, were arrested and flung into the lion's den. And before they reached the bottom, the lions pounced on them and devoured them, bones and all. King Darius' decree. After that, King Darius wrote the following to all the people groups of his kingdom, those of every nation, tribe, and tongue, throughout the land. May peace and prosperity be greatly multiplied to you. I hereby decree that throughout my royal dominion, all people everywhere will tremble in fear before the God of whom Daniel worships. He is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion continues without end. He is a mighty Savior and deliverer. He performs astonishing miracles in heaven and on earth. He alone has rescued Daniel from the claws of the lions. From then on, Daniel prospered greatly during the reign of Darius and during the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Chapter 7. Daniel's first vision, the four beasts. During the first year of the reign of King Belshazzar of Babylon, I, Daniel, had a dream filled with visions while I lay on my bed. So I wrote down my dream, describing in full all that I had seen. Suddenly, in my night vision, I saw the four winds of the heavens burst forth upon the great sea. Then, emerging from the tossing sea, came four immense beasts, each with different from the others. The first one was like a winged lion, with wings like an eagle. As I watched, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, standing on 2 feet like a person, and it was given a human heart. Then the second beast I saw resembled a bear. It was half crouching, and it had 3 ribs clenched between its fangs. It was told, "Stand up and devour more flesh." After that, I looked on, and behold, there was another one that looked like a tiger. On its back were 4 large wings of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority for dominion. Then in my night vision, behold, I saw a 4th beast. It was dreadful, terrifying, and incredibly powerful. It had huge iron teeth used for crushing and devouring its victims. With its massive feet, it trampled on what was left. It had 10 horns and was totally different from the other beasts. As I was wondering about the horns, suddenly another little horn sprouted up among them and tore out by the roots 3 of the previous horns to make room for it. On this little horn, there were eyes like that of a man and a mouth speaking arrogantly. The courtroom of heaven. As I looked on, I observed a heavenly courtroom. Various thrones were being arranged until the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow, and his hair was white like perfectly clean wool. His throne was a tempest of fiery flames, set upon wheels of blazing fire. A surging stream of fire flowed from before him. Immeasurable numbers of people were serving him, and countless myriads were attending him. The court convened for judgment, and the books were opened. As I kept on looking, I heard boastful words being spoken by a little horn. As I watched, the verdict was issued. The 4th beast was killed, and its body was thrown into the blazing fire. As for the rest of the beasts, Their dominion had been taken away, but they were allowed to continue living for an appointed time. Then, as I was looking on in my night visions, suddenly I saw one like a son of man coming in the midst of the clouds of heaven. He was ushered into the presence of the Ancient of Days and presented before him. Then the Ancient of Days conferred upon him dominion, glory, and kingship. People of every nation and language group worshipped him. His dominion is everlasting and will never pass away, and his kingdom will never be destroyed. Interpretation of the vision. As for me, Daniel, I was terrified by these night visions, and my spirit was deeply disturbed by all that I saw. I went up to one who was standing there and asked him to explain the true meaning of what I had witnessed. So he gave me the interpretation. These 4 great beasts represent 4 empires that will rise to power over the earth. But after them, the holy ones, the most high ones, will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. But I was curious to know more about the 4th beast. It was much different from all the others, the terrifying, dreadful beast. It crushed its victims with claws of bronze and with teeth of iron, and then trampled on them. Also, I wanted to know more about the 10 horns on its head, and how the more prominent horn that spouted up and uprooted the 3 of the previous horns. I wanted to gain insight about the conspicuous little horn, more imposing than the others, with eyes in it and a mouth speaking arrogantly. As I watched, that horn fought against the holy ones and was defeating them until the everlasting one came on the scene. He handed judgment over to the saints of the Most High, and dominion was given to the holy ones of the Most High. Then the time came when the holy ones took possession of the kingdom. He gave me the interpretation. The 4th beast means that there will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and shatter it to pieces. And the 10 horns are 10 kings that will arise from the 4th kingdom. They will succeed each other, but after them, an 11th king will rise to power. He will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 of those kings. He will speak blasphemous words against the Most High and try to wear down the holy ones of the Most High. He will try to alter the set periods of time and change God's decree. And the saints will be subjected to his power for a time, times and half a time. But when the heavenly court convenes, his ruling power will be stripped from him, his authority will be abolished and destroyed forever. Then the Most High will give to his holy ones the kingdom and the dominion and the grandeur of all the kingdoms on earth. All rulers and authorities will serve and obey him, for his kingdom is everlasting. That is all that I saw in my dream. I, Daniel, was so greatly terrified by my thoughts that my face turned pale, but I hid the vision in my heart. Chapter 8, Daniel's second vision. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, I, Daniel, saw a second supernatural vision. In my vision, I suddenly found myself in the fortress city of Susa, the capital of the province of Elam, standing beside the Ulai Canal. As I looked about, behold, I saw a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 long horns, one behind the other, but the one behind was longer. I watched as the ram charged toward the west, then the north, and then the south. With each conquest, it became even more powerful. No beast could withstand it or be rescued from its power. It did whatever it pleased. As I considered what it all meant, I saw a male goat come crashing from the west, racing across the whole earth without touching the ground. He had a single prominent horn on his forehead. The goat came up to the two-horned ram that I saw standing beside the canal and rushed at it with savage force. Then I saw him reach the ram and attack it with furious blows. He smashed it so hard that it broke off its two horns, for the ram had no power to withstand it. The goat knocked the ram to the ground and trampled it down, and there was no one to rescue the ram from its power. Then the goat grew exceedingly arrogant at the very peak of his power. His big horn abruptly snapped off. In its place, 4 prominent horns came up, each pointing to a different direction. From one of them, a small horn emerged. It eventually grew to be very long, and its power extended toward the south, the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew so powerful that it attacked the armies of heaven and hurled some of the starry host to the ground and trampled them down. The horn arrogantly exalted himself against the prince of the heavenly armies. It abolished the daily sacrifices, and the place of his sanctuary was defiled. God's people began to turn away from him and gave themselves to the power of the horn. Sin replaced the daily sacrifices on account of the rebellion of the people. The horn was successful in all it attempted to do. Truth was cast down to the ground. Then I heard a holy one speaking. Another one asked the first one, the wonderful numberer, "How long will it be until this vision is fulfilled in relation to the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the handing over of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the host of God's people?" He answered, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be purified." The angel Gabriel interprets Daniel's visions. While I, Daniel, was pondering the vision I had seen, suddenly there appeared before me one who looked like a man. Then I heard the voice of someone calling out over the waters of the Ulai Canal, "Gabriel, help this man understand the meaning of his vision." As the angel Gabriel came closer to where I was standing, I was so terrified that I fell face down on the ground. Then he said to me, "Daniel, son of man, you need to understand that your vision refers to the time of the end." When he spoke with me, I lost consciousness and passed out. But he took hold of me and raised me to my feet. "Listen," he said, "and I will tell you what will take place in the time of wrath. For the vision pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram that you saw with 2 long horns represents the kingdoms of the Medes and the Persians. The male goat represents the kingdoms of Greece, and the big horn on its forehead is the first king of that Greek empire. As for the horn that was broken off and replaced by 4 prominent horns, this signifies that 4 other kingdoms will rise from its midst, but their combined power will not be as great as the first. When their reign comes to an end and their crimes have reached their full measure, there will arise a stern king skilled in stubbornness and trickery. He will grow in might, but will not through any power of his own. He will cause amazing devastation, succeeded in every undertaking, and destroy mighty ones, the saints of the Most High. By his cunning, he will make treachery succeed under his rule. In his own mind, he will highly exaggerate his own importance. When they are at ease, he will suddenly destroy many. But when he rises up, the prince of all princes will be broken, but not by any human power. The explanation of the vision you had about the evening and morning sacrifices is absolutely true. And seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was dazed and lay sick for several days. Then I got up and went back to serve the king. I was perplexed by the vision, for it seemed beyond understanding. All right, Daniel chapter 9. Daniel considers Jeremiah's prophecy. These things happened during the first year Darius, son of Xerxes, was king over Babylon. He was a descendant of the Medes. During his first year of rule, I, Daniel, was studying the scriptures and noticed that according to the word Yahweh had revealed to the prophet Jeremiah, 70 years must pass while Jerusalem lay in ruins. Then I turned my heart to the Lord God, seeking an answer from him, pleading for mercy with fasting, wearing sackcloth and sitting among ashes. Daniel intercedes for his people. I prayed to Yahweh, my God, and made this confession. My Lord, you are the great and awesome God who faithfully keeps your covenant of love with those who love you and keep your commands. Yet we have sinned, acted wickedly, and done under all heaven. As the law of Moses warns, this calamity came upon us in full measure. And even now, Yahweh, we have not sought to please you, our God, by turning away from our wickedness and following your ways of truth. Yahweh, you have waited for the right moment to unleash this calamity upon us. Yahweh, our God, you are just and right in all that you have done, for we defiantly ignored your voice. And now, Lord our God, you delivered your people out of the land of Egypt with mighty power. You have won fame and gained renown for yourself even to this day. But we acknowledged our sin and wicked ways. Lord, you have always demonstrated your faithfulness to Israel. So now please turn your fierce anger away from Jerusalem. It belongs to you and sits on the hill where sacrifice is made. All the other nations who live around us despise your city and your people because of the sins of our ancestors and because of our sins also. And now, our God, I am your servant, and I beg you, please answer my prayers. Make your face to shine upon your ruined temple so that everyone will know that you are Lord. Turn your heart to hear my prayer, oh my God. Listen to my cry, and please look carefully and see our despair and the devastated city which bears your name. We bring our request to you and ask for your mercy, not because we deserve it, but because of your extravagant, infinite love. Lord, hear us and forgive us. Lord, please be attentive and act for us. Do not delay in answering us, for your own sake, my God, and for the city, and for your people who bear your name. Gabriel explains the 77s. While I was absorbed in prayer, confessing my sins and the sins of my people, Israel, and presenting my request before Yahweh, my God, on behalf of Jerusalem, his holy hill, Gabriel, whom I had seen in a vision previously, came flying down from heaven. He touched me at that time of the evening sacrifice. He gave me understanding and said to me, Daniel, I have come from heaven to impart insight and understanding concerning this prophecy. As soon as you began to pray, God gave you an answer. For you are a precious treasure to God. Now, carefully consider the message and understand the revelation of the vision. God has decreed for your people and for the holy city a period of 70 times 7. For these reasons, to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to cancel guilt, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to confirm the prophetic vision, and to anoint the Most Holy One. You must know and understand this. From the issuing of God's decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Jerusalem will be rebuilt with broad streets and a trench, but during times of great distress. After those 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off and left with nothing. The people of the commander will destroy both the city and the sanctuary. Then its end will come like an overwhelming flood. Until those 62 weeks end, there will be war. The decree of desolation has been issued. For 1 week, he will confirm a covenant with many people, but in the middle of that week, he will abolish sacrifices and offerings. On the wing of the temple, an appalling abomination will be erected, and the abomination will remain there until God does away with the one who placed it there, just as God has determined. Daniel chapter 10. The man in white linen appears to Daniel. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, I, Daniel, known as Belteshazzar, received a profound word, a true revelation, but I struggled to understand it. Finally, its interpretation was disclosed to me in a vision, and I began to understand the word. At that time, I was in a period of mourning for 3 weeks. During the entire 3 weeks, I ate no delicacies, no meat, and no sweets. I drank no wine, nor did I groom myself. On the 24th day of the 1st month, I had a vision while I was standing on the bank of the great Tigris River. I opened my eyes to look about me, and I saw a man approaching who was robed in white linen and wearing a belt of pure gold. His body was like a glowing gemstone, his face shining as bright as lightning. His eyes were blazing like fiery torches. His arms and legs were gleaming like polished bronze, and the sound of his voice was thunderous like the roar of a multitude. Although others were present, I was the only one who experienced this open vision. Yet it was so real that it terrified those who were with me, and they ran away to hide. I found myself alone, gazing on the astounding vision. I was left stunned and powerless. My appearance was altered beyond recognition, and what little strength I had deserted me. Daniel's dialogue with an angel. As soon as the angel began to speak to me, I fell unconscious with my face to the ground, as in a coma. Then I felt a powerful hand grip me and help me to my hands and knees. I was trembling with fear. He said, Daniel, you are greatly loved and a precious treasure to God. Now stand up and understand the words that I'm about to say, for God has sent me to you. So I rose to my feet, still shaking like a leaf. He reassured me by saying, Daniel, don't be afraid, for I have come to bring to you the answer to your prayer. From the first day you sought to understand the revelation and humbled yourself before God, your words were heard in heaven. However, for the past 21 days, the principality over the kingdom of Persia stood to oppose and resist me. Then Michael, one of the chief princes of heaven, came to my assistance. I was left there confronting the king of Persia. Now I have come to help you comprehend what will happen to your people in the final days. For the vision pertains to a time still to come. Upon hearing these words, I bowed face down and was left speechless. Then suddenly, one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I was finally able to speak. So I said to the one standing in front of me, "My Lord, this vision has left me overcome, undone, and I'm overwhelmed. I feel totally weak and helpless. My Lord, how can I, your servant, even talk to you? I have no strength, and I can barely catch my breath." Once again, the one who looked like a man gripped me and imparted strength into me. He said to me, "Be strong. Be very, very strong. Do not be afraid, for you are greatly loved and a precious treasure to God. God's peace is yours." As he spoke these words, I felt strength pour into me, and I said, "Now I'm ready to listen to you, my Lord, for you have given me strength." Then he said, "Don't you know why I have come to you? I will unveil to you what is written in the book of truth. But first I want you to know that there is none who fights alongside me against these forces of darkness except Michael, your people's prince. In the first year that Darius the Mede was king, I stood up to support Michael and fight with him against the prince of Persia. Now I am about to go back and fight the principality with him. Once we have defeated him, the principality over Greece will come next." Daniel chapter 11, Kingdoms will rise and fall. I will now reveal the truth to you. 3 more kings will rise to power in Persia. A 4th will come who will be much richer than all the others. His great wealth will cause his power to grow until his empire wages war against all the kingdoms of Greece. Then a warrior king will arise who will govern a vast empire and do whatever he pleases. But at the zenith of his power, his empire will be shattered and scattered to the 4 winds of heaven. Though not to his descendants, it will not be as powerful when he ruled it. For his dominion will be uprooted and will be passed on to others who are not his descendants. The Egyptian and Syrian Treaty. The king of Egypt will grow powerful, but one of his commanders will rise to become even more powerful and rule a kingdom greater than his. Then, after some years have passed, an alliance will form, and in order to ensure the peace, the daughter of the king of Egypt will marry the king of Syria. However, her grip on power will not last for long, and the king too will lose his throne. In those days, she, her husband, her child, and those who escorted her to Syria will all be killed. Yet later, one of her family members will rise to become the king of Egypt. He will come against the defenses of the walled city of the king of Syria and defeat the Syrian armies. He will plunder their wealth and take it back to Egypt as spoils, all their precious gold, silver vessels, idols, and statues. For some time, he will leave the kingdom of Syria in peace. Eventually, the king of Syria will invade the kingdom of Egypt, but he will have to retreat to his own country. The king's sons will prepare for war, assembling a powerful group of warriors. One of his sons will swiftly advance, sweeping over the land like a powerful flood. Their armies will press forward and fight all the way to the strong walled fortress of the king of Egypt. Then the king of Egypt will fly into a rage and set out to launch an offensive against the king of Syria, who will have an immense army on his side. However, the king of Egypt will conquer the Syrian forces. The king of Egypt will be filled with pride over his victory and of the many tens and thousands of soldiers he slaughtered. but he will not continue to be victorious. Then the king of Syria will recruit an even larger army than before. And after some years, he will advance a second time with a massive army fully equipped with weapons and supplies. At that time, many will take up arms against the king of Egypt. Renegades from among your own people will rebel in the hope of realizing the vision, but they will fail. Then the king of Syria will advance and build up siege ramps to capture a strongly fortified city. The Egyptian forces will not stand their ground. Even their elite troops will not be strong enough to resist. The invading king of Syria will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to resist him. He will occupy the land of splendor, and all of it will be under his control. Then, with the might of his entire kingdom, he will resolve to conquer Egypt by cunningly making a peace treaty with the king of Egypt. The king of Syria will offer one of his daughters in marriage to the king of Egypt in order to defeat his kingdom. But his plan will fail. His plan will fall apart and will not work to his advantage. The king of Syria will next turn to the coastlands and capture many cities, but a foreign commander will put a stop to his arrogance and make him suffer the consequences of his defiant insolence. He will then retreat to the well-protected fortresses of his own country. In time, he will be defeated, lose his grip on power, and disappear. His successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the wealth of his kingdom. In a short time, however, the king will die, though not in the heat of battle. Syria's evil king. The man in white linen continued, "In his place will rise a despised usurper of the throne, who had no claim to royal status. He will attack the kingdom when the people least suspect it, and he will seize the kingdom through deceit. He will totally sweep away every opposing army that stands before him and crush them. He will even kill the high priest of the covenant. And after he forms an alliance with him, he will act deceitfully, and despite his initial small following, he will grow ever stronger. Then, unexpectedly, he will by stealth invade rich, fertile provinces and achieve what none of his ancestors did. And he will distribute the spoils and lavish them upon his followers. He will plot to defeat opposing forces protected in fortified positions, and he will succeed, but only for a short time. He will stir up his might and courage, muster a large army, and wage war against the king of Egypt. However, the king of Egypt will fight back with an even greater army, a massive and powerful army, but he will be defeated because of secret plans devised against him. His closest advisors who eat at the king's table will attempt to kill him. His army will be swept away, and many will fall in the slaughter. These two kings will sit at the same table and exchange lies with their hearts, filled with evil motives, but their plans will come to nothing, for the time set by God has still not yet come. Then the treacherous king of Syria will start back home with his great spoils. He will set his heart against the holy covenant, take action against it, and then return to his own land. And the time God has appointed, he will go back to attack Egypt again. But this time, the outcome will not be as before. Roman ships will oppose him, and he will lose heart. He will retreat and take out his indignation against the holy covenant and show favor to those who forsake that holy covenant. He will then dispatch his armed forces to enter and profane the sacred temple stronghold. They will abolish the daily sacrifice and in its place set the blasphemous abomination that brings desolation. The Syrian king will entice with flattery those who betray the holy covenant, but those who know their God will stand firm and valiantly resist. These who are filled with wisdom will help many understand what is happening. However, for a season, they will face severe testing. Some will go into captivity, some will be robbed, and some will be killed by the sword and by the flames. During this persecution, God's people will receive a little help, though many will join with them insincerely. Even some of the wise leaders will stumble, yet this will lead to them being purged, purified, and made clean, until the time of the end, for the appointed time is still to come. The arrogant king. The king will grow more and more arrogant and do whatever he pleases. He will exalt himself above every other god in utterly horrendous blasphemies against the God of all gods. He will be successful until God's wrath reaches the boiling point, for what God has decreed will certainly be fulfilled. The king will not respect the gods of his ancestors, the God worshipped by women, nor any other god, because he will consider himself the greatest God of all. Instead, he will glorify the God of strongholds. He will honor this God, unknown to his ancestors, with gold and silver, precious stones, and costly gifts. That king, with the help of his foreign god, will defend his own fortresses. He will give great honor to those who accept him as ruler and elevate them as high officials and parcel out the land to them as their reward for their loyalty. The demise of the arrogant king. At the time of the end, the king of Egypt will lock horns with the king of Syria, but the king of Syria will come storming out against him like a whirlwind with chariots, cavalry, and great fleet of ships. He will pass through countries, overrun them, sweep through them like a flood. He will even invade the glorious land, and many countries will fall. But Edom, Moab, and what remains of the Ammonites will escape. He will use his power to attack many countries, and Egypt will not escape his onslaught. He will confiscate all the Egyptian treasures, including its silver and gold. Libyans and Ethiopians will be in submission to him. Then reports will come from the east to the north that will trouble him, and he will set out with furious rage to bring death and complete destruction to many. He will pitch his lavish royal tents between the sea and the beautiful mountain of the holy temple. Yet he will come to his end all alone, with no one to stand with him. Daniel chapter 12, the end of the age. At that time, the great angel prince, Michael, protector of your people, will take his stand. It will be a time of great distress, the worst trouble your nation has ever known. When that time comes, your own people will be spared, all those whose names are found written in the book of life. Multitudes of those who are sleeping in the land of dust will awaken, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting disgrace. Those who are wise will shine radiantly as the sky at midday, and those who turn many to the way of righteousness will shine brightly as the stars for all eternity. And you, Daniel, must guard these words and keep the scroll sealed until the time of the end. Many will go here and there, and knowledge will continue to increase. The two angels by the river. I, Daniel, then looked and saw two others standing, one on each bank of the river. One of them said to the man dressed in linen who was hovering above the river, "How long until these wonders take place?" I heard the man answer, who was dressed in linen, hovering above the water, above the river. He raised his hands to heaven and swore by him who lives forever, a time and 2 times and half a time. All this persecution will not end until the opposition of God's holy people is completely crushed. Angelic revelation explained. I heard his answer, but it was like a riddle to me. So I asked him, "Sir, how will all of this transpire?" "You may go in peace, Daniel," he replied. "The understanding of this message is to remain secret and sealed until the time of the end. God will purify many people and make them clean and spotless, while the wicked will continue doing what is wicked. This revelation will remain a riddle to the wicked, but those who are wise will have profound understanding. Between the end of the continual burnt offering and the abomination that brings destruction will be 1,290 days. Blessed are those who wait and faithfully endure to the end of the 1,335 days. As for you, be at peace and rest, and you will rise for your reward at the end of the age."